We sat down this week with former New York Congressman Bill Owens to talk about the upcoming special election here in the North Country and those cabinet picks. We talked with him earlier in the week before Matt Gaetz withdrew as Mr. Trump's pick for Attorney General. And former Congressman Bill Owens is with us. Nice to see you again. Welcome back.
Good to see you, Tom. I'm happy to be here.
The last time we had a special election was 15 years ago, as you well know, back in 2009 when we were New York 23. You ran and won that election to represent the 23rd District in Congress. John McHugh stepped down to become the Secretary of the Army, and there was a three-way race for the open seat. You won in a close race over Doug Hoffman, who was the Conservative Party candidate, by a couple thousand votes. The special election will likely happen in late January when the new administration takes over. If the Congresswoman is confirmed, the county chairs for the Republican and Democratic parties here in the 21st District will have to get together and choose their candidate. Is that the same way that it worked back then?
Same process, yes.
Back then, you had to reach out to county chairs. A lot of them probably didn't know who you were at that
absolutely. Point. Many of them had no knowledge, particularly as you went west. And I think, interestingly enough, that's going to be a problem that everyone will face who decides to run now, whether that's Republican or Democrat, is that if you have a knowledge of someone, if you will, up and down the eastern side of the district, like Dan Steck or Billy Jones, no one's going to know who they are in Watertown or in Fulton County. And so the name recognition piece will be very important.
Here in New York 21, now even bigger after redistricting 15 counties, so potentially 15 party chairs.
That's right.
With each party that the candidates will have to reach out to. You've said that you've heard from party leaders and former colleagues who have reached out to you to see if you were interested in running again.
I was very pleasantly surprised by that. And yes, they did. And I indicated to them that I thought that my time had passed and that I wouldn't be moving forward.
Are you guessing several candidates may be interested in jumping into this race?
Well, this past weekend, I heard that there were a number on both sides. And when I ran, there were 11 candidates who went to the Democratic chairs. On the Republican side, there was 3 or 4. And I would think both parties could see in the range of 4 to 6 candidates wanting to be considered for the opportunity to run.
You mentioned a couple already. We could see a number of state lawmakers from the Assembly and State Senate. Dan Steck and Billy Jones from here in the North Country have both said they'll consider it. We could even see a current congressman, Mark Molinaro in the 19th District, lost a couple of weeks ago in the election. He'll wrap up his term now, and he's being mentioned as a possible Republican candidate getting into the race.
I've heard that as well. It strikes me that would be a hard move for him. I think the people in this district are going to look for somebody who is local, if you will. In addition, it would be even harder for him to get name recognition because if you think about Dan Steck and Billy Jones, they're well known in this corridor. Molinaro would not be known in any of the corridors that he would have to participate in. So I would be very surprised.
He could run. As we know, candidates don't have to live in the 21st.
Correct.
They just have to live in New York State. Could we see party leaders either in the state or in Washington getting involved in this, though, and dictating who they think ought to be the candidate?
If you look at the makeup of the House, there's only going to be, it seems like, maximum a 3-seat cushion on the 218 votes. If that's the case, this will become a very important race, and you'll see the DC crowd being interested and raising money in order to make sure that, in the Republicans' case, that they get a Republican elected, and the Democrats are going to have to evaluate what the opportunity looks like. I think that opportunity is going to depend upon Mr. Trump's first 60 or 90 days. Because if he does impose tariffs, if he does begins mass deportations, I think that could have a very negative impact on the economy, and that could change people's views of him. I think that the Democrats are going to have to watch that carefully to see if that turns the district a little bit. But it's going to have to be material in order to make it a race.
What about Mr. Trump's cabinet picks? A few surprises, some controversy, some likely to easily win confirmation, perhaps Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. Elise Stefanik, nominated to be the UN ambassador. Do you think she will have an easy go?
I think she'll have an easy path to nomination.
Is one of the requirements to be a cabinet pick being a Trump loyalist?
Oh, it certainly appears that way, given the people who he selected, some of whom, in my mind, are completely unqualified for the job. There are people I don't agree with that or I would have objection to, but they're rational picks, right? They're people who make sense. They have some experience, but I think that a couple of them are going to have, I'm going to change that to say should have a tough time getting through the approval process. Whether or not they will, I think depends upon how tough Trump is on the Republican senators.
What do you think we'll see coming out of this Congress? Will they rubber stamp everything that Trump wants?
I think that's going to be their goal going in. But again, if they only have 3 or 4 seats that they can play with, you have to remember the Freedom Caucus is there. And one of the big issues for Trump is the idea of reducing taxes again. Since he increased the debt by $6 trillion the last time he was in office, the idea that the Freedom Caucus folks will agree to that seems somewhat unlikely to me without a fight. And again, you lose 4 votes, even if they're at 221, 4 votes, Bill's dead. And I think that there are enough loose cannons in that Freedom Caucus to do that, even if it's Trump who is pushing the agenda.
As far as Trump, it sounds as if he will indeed follow through on his campaign promise, the mass deportation of millions of migrants, undocumented citizens living here in the U.S. illegally. Are there concerns that could include undocumented migrant farm workers that a number of farms here in the North Country quietly employ and depend on?
Absolutely. I think there's a great likelihood that that will happen. Now, I think you have to look at timing here. The border czar has said they're going after approximately 1.2 million people who have deportation orders, another 1.4 who have criminal records as their first groups to deport. Logistically, you got to find them. You have to detain them for a while, and then you have to find a country who'll take them. I don't know that Mexico is going to be really excited about getting close to 2.6 million people back. Maybe Venezuela will get some portion of that as well. But that's a big number to move, and I'm not sure how quickly they will be able to do that. So we may not see the full deportation process till maybe the 2nd or 3rd year of his term. But I do think ultimately Trump will get to at least acting out on the issue of the migrant workers on farms.
Lots of talk of new tariffs. Those tariffs produced a lot of anxiety with our trading partners in Canada the first time around for Trump, a 25% tariff on steel back then. Do you think it'll be different this time around?
Over the weekend, I heard Mr. Trump was proposing 100% tariffs on China and 20% on everything else. If that goes into effect, first, it's a violation of NAFTA. You can't impose tariffs unless the other country has done something like provide subsidies for products. And then you can impose tariffs on those products that have been subsidized in non-compliance with the free trade agreement. I think Trump nonetheless will impose them and then just fight it out. That will have a very negative impact on Canada. and it will have a negative impact on the U.S. economy. So how this all plays out in terms of how businesses respond, how the public responds when they see their prices going up, I think there will be howls coming from those groups as they try and persuade Trump not to do that. Whether or not that will work, hard to tell, but I think that there's going to be pushback if in fact what he does results in increased pricing.
Are there concerns about the impact that tariffs could have on the transportation hub here in the North Country, the trade back and forth with manufacturers in Quebec? Could it disrupt the supply chain that both of our countries depend on?
Well, apparently Mr. Trump is looking to cut funding to cities for mass transportation. So if that happens, that will be an indirect way of adversely impacting the transportation hub. Whether or not he's able to do that, because again, you'll have members of the House and the Senate who'll be fighting for those funds, a little hard to tell, but if he does do that, then I think it could have an adverse impact on the hub.
Environmental rules were rolled back during the first Trump administration and came at a time when environmentalists were pointing to the 20-plus years of progress in combating acid rain here in the Adirondacks caused by emissions from plants in the Midwest. Will there be new worries what rules and regulations may be rolled back?
I think the answer to that is absolutely. And I'm sure that Mr. Trump will do everything he can to roll back the various rules and regulations that were put in place to try and control, if you will, climate change and to have a greener economy and particularly a greener transportation economy. And I think that will all go by the wayside while he's in office.
Bill Owens, thank you as always for taking the time to be with us. We
Sure,
appreciate
Tom.
it.